All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started with the second installment of this week's ACT. So, on your papers, you should have passage 6 open. And passage 6 is gonna be mostly EMI because it is fighting scientist questions here. So, just as a preview, we know this passage is talking about evolution. Alrighty. So, 28, both scientists agree that is an EMI question. So both scientists agree that the environment affects evolution, the individuals of a generation of identical traits, acquired characteristics are inherited, random mutations occur. So let's look at evolution, environment, traits, acquired characteristic, and mutations. Those are going to be our key terms for the day. So, evolution occurs by natural selection, random mutations are occurring as the species propagates. Result in traits that help the species adapt to environmental changes. Therefore, the percentage of the population with the okay, so this is mutations, selection, new species. Okay, this one. Evolution occurs by the inheritance of acquired characteristics. Each generation's traits are partially accounted for by all the changes that occurred. So this includes changes that occurred as a result of accidents, changes in the environment, overuse of muscles. Okay, so this isn't mutation. So this is saying that, like, I stretched my neck to get food, so now the next one has long necks. So this one is old gen adapts, and so new gen born with those traits. That's how it ends. Okay, so let's go back here. The individuals have identical traits. That's not what they said. Acquired or inherited. That's only scientist 2. Random mutation occurs. That's only scientist 1. So we can cross off that, cross off that. Our answer to 28 is F. All right, 29. How would the two hypotheses be affected if it found that all of the offspring of an individual with a missing leg due to an accident were born with a missing leg? EMI again. Okay, so this one is saying that my giraffe had its leg come off with an accident. Bye-bye leg. That looks like it's pooping, but I'm sorry. Okay, so, and now it's saying that all of its giraffe babies are born with 3 legs. What does that help? So scientist 1, let's review. Scientist 1 says there's a mutation and that leads to selection. Scientist 2 says changes that occurred as a result of accidents. The key term in this question here is accident, so we know we're going to talk about scientist 2 because KT matches. So I'm going to cross off A. It doesn't support scientist 1. It does support scientist 2. So B we can cross off because that's about scientist 1. It would support scientist 2's hypothesis because it is an example of random mutation. It is not a random mutation. That was an accident and an acquired characteristic. So this one matches the key terms in the question. All right, 30. Which of the following characteristics can be inherited according to scientist 2? That is also EMI. Well, definitely number 2, because that's what we talk about. Oh, shoot, I didn't mean to do orange again. My bad. But why would they not be able to inherit fur color and poor vision? So it doesn't say you can't inherit the normal stuff. It just also says you inherit the weird stuff. If you can't tell, I do not agree with scientist 2. But that's neither here nor there. All right, 31. Scientist 1 believes that the evolution of the long neck of the giraffe. We read this passage, so let's go back to it. Scientist 1, what does he say? I'm not doing so hot with the page turning. I apologize. Scientist 1, long necks evolved in giraffes by natural selection, had necks of various sizes, average much shorter, food supply is limited, neck range, more likely to survive. Okay, so he said that the long neck is an advantageous trait over use of the neck muscles. No. But it is advantageous, so that part is good. Advantageous, that means like a good thing. that resulted from a random mutation. Did say that. That resulted from a random mutation that occurred in response to the change in the environment. I'm going to go ahead, by the way, and immediately cross off D, because it's definitely not a disadvantage to have a long neck if you're a giraffe, because we talked about this. So let's see. Between B and C, mutation that occurred in a change to the environment. Did the environment change? The food supply was limited. The individuals at the necks had more access to food. No, it's not saying anything about the trees changing. So food did not change. So the necks had to. This means heat in chemistry, but it also means change basically everywhere else. Just FYI. So A we can cross off, C we can cross off. C is the distractor. But B is our better answer. All right. 32. So we got 3 more questions to go. The fundamental point of disagreement between the two scientists is whether giraffes had short necks. No. Evolved traits come from random mutation or the previous generation. That sounds like a pretty good summary. The environment affects the evolution of a species. No. So here is the thing. This question, this answer choice, you can immediately cross it off because this says disagreement, but the answer to 28 is that they both agree that environment affects evolution. So you just look back at your other answers. Sometimes looking back at other answers, looking back will give clues. It's a good practice in tests. The extinction, because sometimes teachers alike are lazy, so we'll give you a question and then 3 seconds later we'll give you a question that has the answer to that question in it. The extinction, not all teachers are lazy, but we like things to be convenient. The extinction of a species could be the result of random mutations. Only one scientist talks about random mutation. That's only scientist 1, so we're going to say no. So the answer to 32 is G. All right, 33. So close to the end, guys. Keep on trucking. All right, 33. Suppose evidence was found that suggested that before the discovery of fire, human skin lacked the nerve endings necessary to detect extreme heat. Okay, which of the following, if true, would most likely seriously weaken scientist 2? So scientist 2 is all about your grandma had an accident and so you were born with the same issue, like scar, that resulted from her accident. Okay, human skin is capable of generating nerve endings with new functions during life. This also, by the way, the weakened part is the lowest thing that we got on the interim. We did not do well on this standard. The total number of nerve endings in the skin of a human is determined at birth and remains constant until death. Huh. That one's a pretty good thing because scientist 2 is saying that we get this, from accidents that happen to our parents. So generating new nerve endings with new functions, yeah, that's more scientist 1 support, but it doesn't really weaken scientist 2. An excess of nerve endings that are sensitive to extreme heat is relatively common human mutation. That's also scientist 1. No evidence exists to suggest that an excess could be acquired through mutation. All of scientist 1. Okay, so every single one of these says that scientist 1, or that is mostly about proving scientist 1 right, but you want something that proves scientist 2 wrong. So this would make scientist 2 wrong, versus the other 3 would still just make scientist 1 right, without necessarily misproving or disproving scientist 2. That one is really difficult to go through in your head. But say that this was constant. If these never change, then that means they're not changing generation to generation. All right. The average height of a full-grown person today is significantly greater than the average height of a full-grown person 1,000 years ago. If it was proven that the increase in average height was due only to evolutionary changes, how would scientist 1 most likely explain this increase? So instead of mutating, only evolutionary changes. So this one, we want to talk about scientist 1, who talks about random mutation, but also natural selection. So we're going to focus on the selection part. People genetically prone to growing taller have been more likely to produce offspring. That's a selection thing. Improvements in nutrition have led to greater average growth over person, and this growth has been passed on from one generation to the next. Nope. The growth passing on thing, that's scientist 2. Increased height is not a trait that can be acquired through mutation. That's not gonna help. Measurements of the average height were less accurate, then that's a cop-out response. This is the cop-out. Don't take that one, because that doesn't actually have to do with the scientist. So your answer to 34 is F. This passage is probably the hardest one to think through.